Thank you very much for spending a little bit of your precious time with me on this talk today about the magic of family film. I am going to give a very brief introduction of me, show a couple of examples, then I'm going to go through my motivation for why I think this is such an important topic and give you some ideas for what you can film. I am then going to go into the more sort of basic practical of how to do this with your camera, like the settings. I think that's one of the things that people tend to worry about. And then at the end, I'm going to briefly talk about how I pull things together into a final film. At the end of this session, there's going to be a live Q&A, which I am really looking forward to. So please, please, please be super engaged and ask all your questions. That is the best part of these kind of talks, so make the very, very most of that. The kind of family films that I am going to be talking about is a film you create for a family, either your own or a client. It might be in their home or it might be on location, but it's basically an extension of a family picture. It's like pressing play, and because you get that extra load of emotion from the movement and the sound, you are immediately transported back to that moment.
Summer gave me you.
I am actually Danish, hence the dodgy name and the dodgy accent, and I apologize for both of those. I have been in the UK for over 20 years. My husband is English, we have two lovely boys, and my signature sort of photography work is around kids. It's location outdoor, children and families. I did my associateship with the MPA last year in that kind of genre. I won Child Photographer of the Year, Overall Photographer of the Year in our region. So that was my base. I am definitely a clicking mom. I take a lot of pictures for our family personally as well. I'm never going to be that photographer that didn't have anything of our own family. So adding film was a really natural extension to that kind of work. And I use the film both for us personally as a family and for my client work. So if you use it for clients, you can break those opportunities down even further into offering family film as a full-blown service. You could offer it as either included or an add-on to your normal photography sessions, capturing some film footage at that point. Or you can use it as behind the scenes to show people how your sessions run. So you have sort of all these opportunities and directions to take it in. I'm going to show you this first sample film, which I think shows how I could edit this in different ways. So the way I am showing it here, I have got some behind the scenes of me, which means I can use this as a promotional tool, but you will see the type of footage. If I take me out, then it becomes something that the family will enjoy and have as an extension to their still images.
Sun comes over mountains and valleys, turn to gold, forests shed their winter and birds sing songs of hope. Spring
So my big motivations behind my love of the family films are twofold. The first one was realizing how you can consciously shape your memories. So when you're first a mom, you have a baby and a toddler and everybody is going, oh, enjoy every moment of it. And you are just piling on the guilt because you are not enjoying every moment of this. This is hard work. And it's very, very easy to come away from that, all these different phases, feeling not good enough. You were not a good enough mom. But then I noticed that when I looked back at the film and the footage, I would see a completely normal mum and I would think, I was good enough. It was fine. We had a good time. And I actually wish that I had learned this back when they were a lot younger than when I did learn this. I think it's super powerful. So we shape our own memories and we shape the memories of our children as well. Nothing in life really ends on a high. It's a bit of a flaw. Like a holiday has to end in airports and motorway traffic and coming home to an empty house and you immediately think, I'm not even sure it was worth going because I've already forgotten that we went. And then you put your beautiful film together and you watch it and you watch your children come over your shoulder watching it and they're smiling and they're just indulging in seeing themselves and all the activities, and all of you will immediately think, oh, that was a great holiday, we had such a good time. And because that is what you're repeatedly exposed to, your mind and everything in your body just accepts that that was the memory and it becomes a really powerful tool. I am not saying we have to create like a fake version of our lives that's all Instagram ready. My personal films are very rough around the edges, but it's still a powerful tool. The other factor that I really hooked onto so emotionally with this is how we can rejoin a moment. It is like taking a picture and then pressing play and suddenly you can see the movements, you can hear the sounds. It's just like being there. And I know it's not very happy, but none of us will live forever. I lost my dad at the end of last year, but I have video footage when we're all together and suddenly he's there and he's moving and he's talking, and there is nothing more powerful than that. So I know that I am emotionally gaining all of these amazing things from the family film, and I know that it's the same things that I can offer to clients on the business side of family film. Which brings us smoothly onto the things that I film or ideas for what to film. So yes, on a personal note, film the holidays and the Christmas and the big Hallmark days, but also film the everyday life. I think, if I think back now and go, if I could see a little flicker of what my mom's life was like, everyday life, when she was 5 or whatever, what would I want to see? What would you want to see if you could be given a little film view into your mom's life when she was X age old? Yeah, I'd like to see their holiday, but actually I would like to see their everyday life. I would want to see my grandma just at the sink peeling potato. I would want to see my mom's bedroom. What were the toys? What were they playing? The books, her clothes. What did the house look like? That's what I want to see, the everyday stuff. And I think we forget to document that in our busy lives. But at the minute, because we're in lockdown, everything else has been stripped away. So now is a brilliant time to create these films of everyday stuff. So I think I would highly recommend to capture, strip everything back, go really basic and just capture your everyday life. Like, we've just had all this snow back in, the beginning of the year, and those moments, they are very nostalgic, amazing things to capture. And then if you put your business hat on, what do you want to capture for your families? So talk to them about it, see what they would like you to capture. But one of the things that is a huge part of my work is mums. Like, I have a big thing about getting mums into pictures, because I think it helps shape our memories. It helps us look at ourselves with our children and think we are good enough. So a lot of my family film work is geared around mums and their interaction with their kids. We struggle to photograph that or film that ourselves because we're always the ones behind the camera. and we don't see ourselves with our children enough. So I do a lot of connection, a lot of interaction, the stuff that the mum won't be able to capture herself. I will always include that in the film. And you can easily do that just as part of your normal family session. So if you are photographing the mum and the children together, then just flick over and capture some video at the same time. If the kids are doing cute things together, again, it's that interaction and the emotion. There's so much emotion in any kind of interaction. And just like we would with a normal photography session, we photograph the big picture and then you do the details. And I would do exactly the same for film. You film the big picture and then you hone in and you can film the details, like the hand holding and the feet and the, you know, all those little storytelling details. I shoot on a Canon 5D Mark III, so that's quite old now really, and I also have a Canon M6, which is quite good actually for video. I do most of my video work on that one, and I have just ordered one of the new Canon mirrorless cameras, if only they would arrive, because I want better quality than what my current cameras are producing. But I think start with whatever camera you've got and practice with that and be happy with that, because there's no point being so hung up on gear. That is my genuine personal view. However, there are two things that I think you might want to consider getting. So the first one is a variable density kind of filter. So it's just a filter that screws onto the front of your camera. So obviously work out what size lens you want to use, and then you can just dial it. It dials something like 10 stops, so you can dial your exposure up or down using that. I will explain when we get to setting your exposure why you want to use one of these, but I do think you will want to get one of those. And the other thing, it's dead cute to record audio, but the built-in audio is typically not great. So an external microphone of some sort might be a good investment. So I have a Rode microphone and I have this one, it's called a Dead Cat, which my kids were very concerned about when it arrived in the post. And I'm not saying you have to get this one, I'm just saying if you want to record good audio, an external microphone might be something to invest in. But those are the only two things that I think outside of a normal camera bag you might need to invest in. So a couple of super basic tips. First one being, if you are using your phone or if you're asking someone else to record behind the scenes for you on a phone, make sure you tell them to do landscape, because on our phones we're really quick to do portraits because that's how we text, that's how we do everything. But you never went to the cinema to see a portrait kind of film. So just make sure anything that's done on a phone is landscape, so it will match everything else you're doing in that video format. Secondly, and I know this applies to still images too, so you're used to this as a photographer, but you want the footage to be as still as possible. There will be some camera shake, and don't be upset by that. But rather than sort of being flying around out here, tuck your elbows in, hold everything really nice and still, and the more calm you can learn to be, the more enjoyable your footage will be. And thirdly, less is often more. There's no advantage in recording really long pieces of footage. You have to look through that. I'm sure you can appreciate the difference between coming home from a shoot with 500 pictures to look through versus 50 pictures to look through. And it's even worse with video. If you record 5 minutes, you have to watch 5 minutes to get the good parts and look through and see what you want to use. Whereas if you have half a minute, then you're only looking through half a minute of footage. So just be conscious of how long your clips are. Obviously, if you're recording someone doing a speech, you can't just say, I'm done after 30 seconds. You have to record the whole thing. But if you're recording family films, most of the time, short snippets is all you need. Okay, let's try and tackle settings then. I think settings is one of the areas that sometimes puts people off putting the camera into video, because you hear things like resolutions and frame rates and it sounds really intimidating, and it totally isn't. So just like when you do a normal picture, you have a good idea of what your end picture will look like, and that's what you shoot for. So when it comes to frame rate, which you will hear people talk about a lot, the frame rate is to a great extent determined by how you want your final film to be. So the biggest differentiator that I use when I choose the frame rate I'm going to be on is whether I want to slow the footage down later on for my final film, or whether I want to play it back at the normal speed. So obviously if I have a child singing, or I have voices that I want to keep, like they're talking or whatever, you can't slow that down because it will sound like this. So if you're recording anything that isn't going to be slowed down, then I will record that at a normal frame rate, and I will cover this in a minute. If I want my footage to be slowed down, and actually I slow a lot of my family film footage down, I would say, unless it's because someone is talking, I will slow it down, in which case I know that I need to record it at a higher frame rate. So let me just get a little piece of very high-tech post-it notes here to perhaps help demo that. So we all know that film is really just made up of lots and lots and lots of frames of still pictures. And the frame rate refers to how many of those still frames you have. So if you imagine you have your frame rates that you recorded in, and then afterwards you might choose to slow that footage down, i.e. your 1 minute is now going to take up 2 minutes, so it gets stretched out. If you have very, very few frames, let's go for just very few frames, and we stretch them out, you will have big gaps between those frames, and hence it won't look as nice. So the more frames you have, the smaller the gaps will be, even when you go and stretch that out or slow it down, whichever way you want to look at it. Stretch it, slow it. So if you want to slow your footage down, you will need more frames to fill that bigger space. And if you're playing it back at the same speed that it was recorded, you can go for a normal frame rate. So I am on a Canon, and my options are 25 and 50 for my frame rates on the 5D Mark III, and the same actually on the M6. I think on the Nikons it might be something like 30 and 60, so they're slightly different between the brands, but you will definitely have different options. And on the newer camera you will probably have like 120 frame rates, so you'll have bigger, more impressive options for slowing it down into like proper slow-mo as well. Now there is a guide for setting your exposure. Don't be put off by this, it's not as bad as it sounds. That says your shutter speed should be twice your frame rate. And I think this is where people just zoom out and they go, it's too complicated, but it really isn't. So if you have decided if you're playing your footage back normally or slow, you know what frame rate you're going for. So mine on my Canon 5D will either be 25 or 50. So once I've decided on that, I'm slowing it down, so I know it's going to have to be a frame rate of 50. Then I know that my shutter speed is going to be 125. It's not a perfect double, it just doesn't translate perfectly on a Canon. But go to whatever is the nearest double. And if I am not slowing it down, like what I'm recording right now is at 25 frames, because it's going to be played back normally, so I am recording it at 60, shutter speed of 60. Now a shutter speed of 60 is really low, which is great. This completely works in our favor because it means we can actually record video sometimes when it's low or light than we would have liked to taking pictures in. So it's a really good thing. Now once you've got your frame rate and your shutter speed, then you can pick your F number and pick that creatively. You know, that's what we do. So I will typically be shooting really on those low F numbers, f2.8, f3, whatever it might be, because I like that softness. So you set that depending on the look and feel that you like, but a lot of us are on those soft, beautiful, emotional kind of look, so that's often where we will linger, which just leaves your ISO to sort of adjust your overall exposure with. So as a guide, you choose your frame rate based on the final output. Is it going to be slowed down or not? Then that will give you your shutter speed. You choose your f-stop creatively, and then your ISO sort of becomes your exposure compensator. And this is where the filter comes in, because sometimes outside on a bright day, if you want to shoot wide open, even on an ISO of 100, then if you're on a shutter speed of 60, or even on a shutter speed of 125, it's just going to blow out completely. So you really do need the filter, and you will quite quickly come into territory where you need the filter. So that is where that comes into play, is when you set your exposure. Personally, I am happy around 1920. I feel quite happy with that, as long as I could do that on a higher frame rate, which at the minute I can't on the 5D, but I can on the M6. But I know a lot of people will prefer 1K, 4K, 8K, like they will want other things. But you have to weigh the pros and the cons, because in terms of the file sizes, they will be enormous when you do 4K, and the capacity required for your PC to edit those kind of files will be much bigger. So you don't want to get into this and then create something that then becomes impossible for you to handle afterwards. So I would say keep it simple, go with what your camera can produce, and then see how you like that quality. If it's not good enough, then upgrade and try the next one up. So lenses is the other thing that people always ask about. As a guide, I think it's definitely easier to handhold a prime lens, because you don't have the temptation to zoom, and the second you start zooming and trying to manual focus, it's a bit more of a recipe for shake. That doesn't mean you can never do it. I'm just saying my advice would be to start with a prime. I spend probably 80% of my video time on a 35mm. I do sometimes now, if I'm on a location shoot with my 70-200, I mean, it's a nightmare. I'd never recommend anybody doing video on that. But I do now swap over to video sometimes, just because if they're doing something cute, I don't have to move, I don't have to change anything. I just swap over and I capture it and swap it back. But I don't try to zoom and move and do anything else. The other thing with lenses is they all have a different feel. So my macro, you only have to touch it the tiniest little bit and focus will change. Whereas on the 35mm, I have to really, really move that focus ring for any of the focus to really travel. So see which you prefer. If you prefer the really sensitive or not so sensitive, have a try. Don't look at whatever lenses you've got now and think, oh, it's not going to work. They will. Just have a go with whatever you've got. And if all you've got is a zoom, then use that, but just pick a focal length and leave it there, probably, because it is hard to start out doing both. So my workflow for pulling everything together into that final film goes along the lines of, I bring all my footage into DaVinci Resolve. I use the free version of this software, it's brilliant. I then go through all the footage and I pick the pieces that I want to use. I pick the music. So it goes without saying, you have to use royalty-free music. I have a subscription to Soundstripe, so I get most of my music from there. But there's MusicBed, Premium Beat, any of those are really, really excellent sites for getting excellent music. The music will make or break your family film. Like if it's really plinky-plonky, cheap, nasty music, it will just look terrible. I'm really sorry, but don't do it. Please invest in some half-decent music to go with your tracks. I also get anything else ready, like my logo, my end slide, any still images I need in there, anything like that. I make sure I have absolutely everything ready, and then I put it together on the timeline. I recommend that you keep your brand in mind. I am quite a bit of a brand geek. So make sure it's on brand for you. Like, are you really elegant? Are you fun and upbeat? What kind of look and feel are you after? So make sure maybe the end slide is always your brand color, any text is in the right font, just so it's consistent with your brand and you as a business. Final example of a family film that was recorded on location at golden hour. So I am constantly swapping between video and stills. I do it all the time in my films. I have the video settings saved as my custom settings 1 and custom settings 2, and that works really well for me because it means I can very quickly swap from video back to stills. that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you will go away and create some family films, both for your personal family, for yourself, because it's so important. But I also hope you will introduce it as part of your business and for your customers, because I know it's such a valuable thing that we can give to people. Now, please do come and ask me lots of questions in the live Q&A. I think that is the main part of these things. So don't hold back, don't be shy, don't be the one that thinks afterwards, oh, I wish I'd asked that question. I'm obviously on social media. If you want to follow me, I'm mostly active on Instagram, but happy to answer any questions, and I'll see you in the Q&A in a minute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well done if you're still awake, if you've done a full day of all these seminars back to back. I'll cover some of the questions that I've seen coming through as we went through. I've probably covered some of it as the video went along, but I'll still just go through them again and make sure everybody's happy. I have a bit of a question to you, like pop in the questions if this is something you do already or something that you would like to do, because I'm quite curious at the minute to see where we are as an industry, like how many people are sort of looking at this and taking this up. So I'm going to take the questions a little bit backwards because I think that makes most sense. So it says, which version of Resolve am I on? I'm so little about the gear and the software and all of that. I couldn't even tell you, but I can tell you it is not a recent one at all. I'm only interested in that last outcome of the pretty film. But I know it's not the last one, but I will say I'm sure whichever version I am on was a beta when I installed it, and I wouldn't be remotely worried about installing the new version that they've got out, even if it says it's a beta. So I don't know if that helps. I wouldn't worry, honestly. It's a really good program. You'll like it regardless of the version that you use. There's a question about the ND filters. Yeah, I was also told in the early days that don't go for the really cheap ones. So I've never really tested different ones. I'm sure all the ones I've got are Hoyas. So yeah, I don't really have a lot of experience for different ones, but I have also been told buy a decent one. So that's what I would recommend. Invest in a decent one. And there's a question about music, which I think I covered. You have to get royalty-free music. You just have to. It's just not worth risking it. They will easily close your social media down, and it's just not worth it. As I said in the video, I have a subscription with Premium Beat. No, I haven't. With Soundstripe. Sorry, I have a subscription with Soundstripe. But Premium Beat and Musicbed are also really, really good sites to get music from. Really good selection and quite reasonable. Soundstripe is very reasonable when you have a subscription with them. And do you always use manual focus? I do. It's I know people are like, oh, it's so hard to manual focus, but honestly, it is something you get used to a little bit. And you can totally use autofocus, and there's nothing wrong with using autofocus and do it. But I didn't even have the option because the 5D doesn't offer autofocus on the Mark III. I think it does on the Mark IV. Use it and see how you go. Where I kind of get a little bit annoyed with it sometimes. I have autofocus on the M6 and I occasionally try it. But if you have multiple children, you can't control who it picks up focus on. And sometimes it kind of jumps from one child to the other or from the parent to the child. And I just prefer to have control over where the focus goes. And I promise you do get into a habit of using it. And I don't find it a big issue to use manual focus at all. I'm just an enthusiast, want to use it more for personal projects. Do you know what? I think personal projects I think we need to value them, possibly even more than what we do for our customers, because we don't want to be those people that did everything for the customers and then nothing for ourselves to show in the end. And I also saw someone said at the beginning about like the longevity, it is for the future, and it really is for the future. And much as we indulge today in finding those old pictures, no one can find our stuff from today if we don't sort of preserve it. And it's good to do stuff on our phones, and it's fine to do little clips, but no one will find those little clips in 60 years. What they will find is the stuff that we've made the effort to create into a little film and store somewhere accessible. It is like the equivalent of the picture album when you put it into a film. How do you select the music? There are some artists that I like and go back to. When you go into the music sites, you can see the sound scopes, and you will become used to looking at that, and you will go, oh, this has got a lot of transitions, or this is really like sort of monotonous as it goes along. So you'll become used to looking at them, and you'll become familiar with your style and how you like it. So I like mine not too slow, but not plinky plonky either. So I land in the middle of those. So it's sort of happy and upbeat, but elegant, I think, at least to an extent. Do you need a gimbal? No. I don't use any. I honestly, I don't use a tripod. I don't use a gimbal. I don't use a slider. I don't do anything. When I do commercial work, sometimes I bring the slider, but it's very rare. Like for the family work, because it moves so quickly and you want to be quite involved and be able to just roll with whatever happens, I don't bring anything along. You can't just quickly go, oh, just hold that while I mount the camera onto my gimbal, and like the moment is gone, isn't it? I think if you're doing commercial work and you're doing something where it would be a really cool shot of the kids running or, whatever, then definitely. Or maybe with your own children, like I've got a little gimbal for the phone, which is quite good fun, but I don't bring a gimbal for anything that I do with a real family on a shoot. So someone else asked about lenses. I think I covered that. So it's definitely easier to use a prime. Oh, I watched some of the other talks today and someone said they have 135mm for their portraits, and my mind blew, and that is absolutely on my new wish list. But primes are definitely easier to use. And someone also asked about using a telephoto. It's not ideal. No one should go around recommending shooting video on a 70 to 200mm, but sometimes I do, just because that's what I'm doing for the stills. And if the kids are being really cute, it takes no time at all to swap it over and just capture exactly the same. But what I don't do is attempt to zoom and walk with it, and you can't do that. But if you just sat really still and really stable with it, like I'll probably have like my elbow on my knee and just really stabilize it, then yeah, you can get away with it, but it's not ideal. Can you clarify sequence for settings? Yes. I know everybody hates settings. So you decide if you want your film to be played back slow or you want it to be played back at a normal speed. Once you've decided that will decide on your frame rate. Once you know your frame rate, you will double that to get your shutter speed. Your f-stop is completely creative. So do you want it all in focus, or do you want that really soft depth of field? And then you're really only left with your ISO and your filter to do your exposure compensation with. So everything really starts with, is it going to be slowed down or played back at a normal speed? And then all your other settings will slot into place from there. Let me refresh this again. See, what have I missed here? How do I supply the film back to your customer? I just do it as a digital download for them. And that's how I supply my normal digital files as well. But you can obviously put it on a USB. It doesn't really matter at all. Done a lockdown film for my family. Love it. Like, it's such a good thing. And actually, I think a lockdown film it serves to preserve and shape our memories, but also the memories of our kids. I think it's really important that we don't come out of this thinking, oh, that was all dreadful and terrible, and actually sort of focus on the positives of that. Do you use Lightroom or Photoshop for stills? Yes, I use, actually I mainly use Photoshop or Camera Raw and Alien Skin. But my pictures don't, and it's, I don't always lose sleep because I can't match my video footage exactly to the stills. I don't do a lot of color grading or anything of the video. A lot of people would argue I should do a lot more color grading, and maybe I will, but I don't at the minute. What else have I missed? Memory cards. Do you take, look, it does take up more space, but you know what? Touch wood, I've never once had to go into 2 cards despite always shooting stills and video together. Explanation. Oh, thank you. I think, has anybody got any other questions? The one thing that people are always sort of getting hung up on as well is like this swapping between pictures and films. And I typically just bring one body and one lens, and then I run with that and just swap. So I store my settings in the custom settings 1 for doing video that is played back normally, and in my custom settings 2, I store all my settings for video that's going to be slowed down. And it means it is super, super quick to swap between the two. It's it's no problem at all once you get used to it. How important is social media to get visibility? It'd be the way to start if you don't have it before. I think social media is the same across film as pictures, and I think at the minute family films is still a little bit new. It is a little bit of an American, Australian kind of thing, and it will take some time before it really builds in the UK. So I think I just put it out as part of my normal mix on my social media. And it will take time. Like a lot of my stuff, I do it as all inclusive, so they get both. At the minute, I don't particularly push selling just the films as a standalone product. Have I missed anything? Shout if I've missed your. One thing I wanted to point out. What is color grading? Color grading is just like editing for video, where you cheat your colors and all of this. And I don't do a lot. I don't. Some people go, you can get those really cinematic looks and you can do a lot of stuff, but I don't. I'm very, very light-handed with my editing at the minute. I think it matches well. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Thanks lots. That's inspired. Great. I hope a lot will be inspired. What I quickly wanted to say, because it's going to shut me off in a moment, is I'm loving the mirrorless. Like, I'm going to do all my video on the mirrorless. They're so light and easy compared to the DSLRs. Right, so we're going to shut it off in about 15 seconds, I think. But thank you so much. And if anybody does have any questions afterwards, then feel free to message me and I'll be happy to answer them. And I would love to see what people create. So send me a link if you've made a great film. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.